Hello everyone, B-Fight here, and welcome to a new video. We have some new interesting clips to show you. Stay tuned to the end and hope you enjoy.
First thing I want to talk about was I did read through a lot of the comments. I think it was actually probably a really bad idea to, especially the first day, because there were a lot of people who were flaming me and Lily. And it was like, for someone who felt very sure and very confident in what happened to me wasn't right, it still affected me. Although I'm still sure that there's no way that it was like an okay thing. But like some of the comments that I read were just oof. And Lily, oh my. Okay, that's like a whole nother story that I'm like really upset at other people over, but like yeah. Okay. So the first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was how some people were like, oh, that's weird, like why did Fed like sleep in your bed like frequently when you had a boyfriend? And that was something that felt very normal. It was kind of normalized as a Fed thing to do. He just would come into your room and he just chill in your bed on his phone or anything, and it felt super casual. And it was something that I guess it wasn't until I started writing this down, trying to like explain why it was like that I realized like, oh, wait a second. It was only the girls' beds. He didn't ever sleep in Toast or Scar's bed. It was always me, Mon, or Lily. And we just all saw it as like a Fed thing, right? Like, and it was normal though. We'd be like watching a movie and then like he'd just fall asleep there naturally, and like, you know, nothing ever happened. It was just like a very casual, like, we're just friends. And like sometimes you watch a boring movie or like you're watching anime and you just fall asleep. And yeah, it did feel like a very like sibling type of thing, you know? Uh of course, thinking back, like, yeah, he normalized it, but it is kind of weird because it's not like anyone else in the house kind of does that as well. But again, it was like a Fed thing. Also, Sean was aware of this. Like, I always would tell him about anything. I never hid anything from him. So he knew that like we would just watch movies, and then if Fed happened to fall asleep, he fell asleep, you know? So something that did make me feel uncomfortable that I do remember as I was writing this as well was I should have seen a bit of the signs where he did kind of push boundaries, or when I would ask him to not do something, there was always like pushback in terms of like he would take off his pants and just have, and then like, because it's like uncomfortable, or take off his jeans because it was uncomfortable, right? And then I was kind of like, put it back on, like you're not getting like that's not it, sort of thing. He's like, but it's uncomfortable, and it's like, so there's like pushback. So that was something that I didn't let him do that, but like the fact that there was like, I was trying to tell him no and he kept giving this back and forth with me was very frustrating. And that happened a lot, not just like in terms of that, but just in a lot of things that we did. If I said I wasn't uncomfortable with something, he would make it hard for me to say no to him, because it's like yeah, just a lot of back and forth in general. So another thing that I saw a lot as well was a lot of people saying that what he did wasn't that bad, that it was just bad flirting, that he just kissed my hand, and that it wasn't a big deal at all, and we're making it to be like this huge thing where you just want to clout chase and you're just doing it for attention and just a bandwagon. It was, yeah, really insane to see people say that, but it made me wonder, like, if people like read the whole statement or not. It was like kind of frustrating. I think some people didn't read it and maybe they just read like the first 2 paragraphs and it was like, oh, this is too long, like I can't read the rest of it. But I don't think when you flirt, you would flirt your way into your friend's sleeve and like touch a very uncomfortable area that is like near, you know. Even if I were to like, the fact that I feel like I have to do is like to somewhat demonstrate like how hard it is to go into someone's sleeve. Like you have to like these you have to like what you have to do. It is not like a casually brush like my hand against you. It is like a very invasive, like weird thing that no friend would ever like. Do you do this to your friends? I don't know. It's like, okay, sorry, I shouldn't have to justify this or try to like explain why it wasn't okay, but sometimes you just gotta get it out. Sorry, I'm just like letting things out right now. Just some frustrations, I guess. When people say you could have just said no, that line blows my mind, that people will just say you could have just said no. And I'm okay, to be honest. Like, I firmly believe that that isn't correct. And no matter what you comment, you will never ever be able to convince me that I was wrong in that scenario. And I think my message I want to send, because like, is I want other people to hear this as well, who've like either suffered the same thing or are learning about it or anything, that you are not to blame when you didn't want it to happen in the first place. When they were the ones who put you in that position, like, how can other people minimize what you went through and try to blame you when you didn't even want that in the first place? It's not like you don't even expect it to happen. You're put on the spot to think on the spot on what to do while you're still trying to process what the hell is going on. So yeah, I just didn't want to be silent and have people thinking that the mindset of they could have just said no is okay. There's a lot of things that could have been done. If you want to say that I could have just said no, I could have hired a guy and locked my door so that he didn't have a chance of coming in at all. Or maybe if I never moved into the OfflineTV house in the first place, this never would have happened. Or, this is even the crazier part, but he could have just not done it. Like, or even this, at the bare minimum, he could have asked before he did it. He could have not made his way downstairs into my room. There's so many things you could say that could have happened, but you choose to say you could have just said no. Another thing I wanted to address was when people said, you could have handled this privately. And Iman and Skara touched on this as well. And I also saw a lot of clips that other people were talking about it, why it couldn't be handled privately, and I'm really thankful that they spoke up about it, because that was one of like the comments I got the most, which was, why didn't you handle it privately? Yeah, so I'm just gonna explain kind of like a timeline a little bit of like the story of how things developed, and just for you guys to better understand. So me and Fed were like super good friends. Like he was like my best friend in the house. He was someone that I was like super comfortable with. We would hang out every day. And I don't know if you guys remember this, but we'd be like on stream all the time together. I streamed for a lot of, like, streamed with him on his account like super often. And I would be in a lot of his videos or anything like that. So basically one day Toast had like a IRL stream. I don't know if you guys remember, but back then like OfflineTV used to do a lot of group streams or house streams together. And this time it was on Toast's channel. And we were all sitting around the couch, and then we were kind of like playing videos on the TV. And then I remember I was particularly sensitive about this one video, and he was about to play it on the screen, and I remember I was feeling very frustrated. I was trying to say, please don't play the video, and it felt like no one could take me seriously or like see that I was serious about it, because I know we like joke about things a lot. And so I basically was super frustrated, and I was like on the verge of tears, and I ran downstairs to my room to avoid the situation, because I didn't want to cry or like burst out in tears when I was there. And Sean, Lily, and Fed came down to my room. I remember I was like in my bed. I had like my blanket like over me, and my back was like turned to them. And Fed was saying like, if we have a safe word, if anything, like you remember, like it's pineapple, like all this kind of stuff. And I felt better that they came down and like tried to comfort me, but I still couldn't really say much, because if I said something, I think I would have like cried right there on the spot. And so Lily and Fed went back upstairs. Sean stayed downstairs to comfort me, and then I burst out into tears, and I just cried for a bit. I cried a little bit, and like it got all out, you know? And then I felt really bad, because I was like, shit, so like what if someone saw on stream that like I was crying, and like it was on Toast's channel, and I really didn't want there to be drama or anything like that. And so I went on the subreddit to check and see if anyone said anything about me. And they did. They said like something along the lines of Yvonne was very upset, like I don't know what happened, blah blah. And then I saw that someone commented along the lines of she's fine. She typed like debated in the chat, and that they thought like I was just kidding, that I was just pretending to be upset. And so I was like, wait a second, I never typed that from my phone. And I realized I left my I had to go back upstairs to grab my phones, because when I ran downstairs, I left them on the couch. And Fed was the only one who knew my passcode at the time. And so I tried confronting him, and I also went back to the VOD to see if people, like what people in chat were saying when I ran down, to see if they noticed as well. And I saw from that he was streaming the entire time when he went downstairs to check on me. And I didn't know that he was streaming. I thought that like they just came, because my back was turned to them when I was in my blankets. I thought that they just came down to just see if I was okay. I didn't know it was being streamed the whole time. And so I was extremely hurt, because he was the one holding the camera. He was the one holding the stream. And so I message him and I say, like, why didn't you tell me that you were streaming? And I made sure to try and like, when I messaged him, to try to make it seem very like coming from a place of hurt and not anger or aggression. And so I sent that message to him, and I also asked if he went on my phone and typed that in the chat, because it puts on a false narrative. It puts on like a oh, she just like pretended to be upset for content as if I fake that. And it's like, I don't. I was genuinely like, I wouldn't lie or fake that on stream. And so he was very like, his reply was, how was I supposed to know I can't read your mind? That I didn't want it to be streamed. And I was very upset, and I asked him again if he went on my phone, and he said, and he didn't even reply to that. He actually just like ignored it completely when both the times that I asked him if he went on my phone. And so I think at that point I just didn't want to even like confront him anymore or ask him. It felt like I wasn't gonna get A, the apology I wanted, and B, him to admit what he did wrong, or like even to say that he wouldn't do it again, I think. And that was the first time that I felt like I couldn't trust him anymore, and that we couldn't be super good friends, because I was really hurt. This is when we were the closest, that we like for a very long time we were really, really close. And I never imagined that like if I confronted him with a problem or like tell him that I was hurt, that he would respond that way to me. And that was when like the distance, I started like realizing like, oh, I see. It was kind of like a mental note in terms of, I know we can still be good friends, but I see that I can't be that invested in you because of how you confront problems. And I remember I was at a rave, and this girl actually came up to me, and she wasn't the first one that I heard of who was afraid of how we saw her because of what Fed would tell us about her. She basically was someone who was talking to Fed, and Fed was super interested in this girl, and he even came up to me and he said like, I think she's like the one. And he was telling me about all these things that he liked about her. And then I don't know what happened, but at some point he was just like, oh yeah, she just led me on. But I take what he says with a grain of salt, because there's been history of him, like just me not being able to fully trust him. So, and I was right, because this girl came up to me at the rave that we were at, and she was very sad, and she was just like, I hope you guys like don't think badly of me. I heard that Fed told you guys that I led him on and stuff like that, and she was just saying that wasn't the case. And she's, yeah, so again, just felt really bad that she was worried we would see her a certain way because of what he tells us. And I told him that something happened between us when he was drunk, and I asked him if he remembered, and he was just kind of like, oh my god, I'm a horrible person, I can't believe it, etc., etc. And yeah, I'm sure you guys saw my statement. It's like, I'm just going over the story at this point, but yeah, one of the first things he said was, did you tell anyone? And I said, Toast. And then he went, I saw the way his brain, or like what his train of thought was. Then if Toast knows, this person knows. And if this person knows who else knows. He literally said that out loud. And I was still trying to comfort him at this point. And I was like, it's okay, like, this won't affect our friendship or us, like, it's really okay. I was minimizing it so much. I told him, like, Sean is not mad at you, he's really understanding, he doesn't think you're a bad person at all, he knows you were drunk, etc. And I can't remember if Sean was working with us. Sean did our podcast at some point, but that was like a part-time job that really wouldn't, it wasn't a huge thing if he quit or not. And Sean would never like, if he was really upset or like livid about it and didn't give Fed the benefit of the doubt, he would just quit. And he would just never, like, he wouldn't care about that. But Fed said that it would be in his best interest to not be upset at him. And I was super upset hearing that, because Sean is so nice. Like, you did this to his girlfriend at the time, and like you're the one who should be asking for forgiveness. How could you say that? Sean is so fucking nice. And I'm trying to comfort him with, and he said, I was very upset. I remember when I was telling Tosis, that was one of the things that I told him that upset me a lot. And he found out. And yeah, he didn't apologize to me at that time. And I'm not sure if anyone from my community remembers this, but I was particularly emotional during my birthday, around the time of my birthday. I had cried for a week straight. I remember I was miserable, and I felt like I remember this line exactly going across my mind, but I just thought there's nothing worth celebrating. And you guys didn't know at that time. And I remember reading my kudo board and stuff like that, and it was really emotional for me. I read Tosa's message, I bawled my eyes out. And there were a lot of other people who, I remember Nathan wrote this, but Nathan was like, he said something along the lines of, you know, I don't want you to think that you're just part of like offline, like you're really good as an individual as well, etc., etc. And that like hit so hard, because I knew at that time there was a possibility that I wouldn't be with OTV anymore. So yeah, but yeah, basically we were having discussions of that, and Fed was the person that I worked with the most in terms of our company back then, because he wasn't streaming, so it was our responsibility to do most of the OTV work. So he's kind of like the person keeping me in check, or like he would know how much work I'm doing and provide feedback to the rest of the members, or whatever we were working on. I didn't know this back then, and I learned recently. He went to a lot of our friends and ranted about me to them and told them that I was taking up a content creator spot in the house, that I didn't do anything except play League, and it led people to question maybe OTV isn't something that I'm really passionate about or cared about that much. And I was really emotional. I cried a lot because OTV was my home since moving to LA, and I cared about everyone a lot. I'm not making excuses either for tunneling into League so hard, because I believe that to some degree, like, that's also me, right? Like, I did that. You know, I could have controlled it. The League was also really fun, you know? So, like, I'm not trying to blame Fed entirely for that, but he was a part of the reason, because I was trying to avoid him. And it was just easy if I was in a League game to just be like, I'm busy, or like I ranked a lot during that time. That was when I was really motivated to improve, and so it was really easy to just be like, oh, I'm in a ranked game, and he'd just leave. I didn't really feel excited or that I wanted to work with him that much, and I guess I also felt bad for that too, because it seemed like he wanted to like come in and talk or work with me at times. He was also one of the people that I confided in a lot about how sad I was that I was leaving. I remember this scenario specifically where I was laying in my bed and I was crying nonstop, and I was telling him how I felt OTV was family, and no matter where we went, whether it was conventions or events, that I always liked that I had like a general direction that I could walk to. Like at TwitchCon, if I see Lily or whoever, I would be able to just walk towards that general direction because you know, it's like you're walking to your family or your friends. Like it was that, and I was sad that, you know, if we weren't together anymore, like I don't have a direction. And I explained that to him, and he told me that he wouldn't let that happen, that he would refuse to let me leave the group, and he made me feel a lot better. He told me he'd do everything in his power to keep me.
If you like what you see, then consider subscribing. And if you already have, then make sure you hit that notification bell below.